Hi, if you don't know me, I'm Paul Quinn, better known as Andy and Joey's dad for many years, or as the boys have often called me, Noz, or Nozzy, which maybe I should take a minute to explain that. Maybe no one cares, but let's see. When Joey was young, he couldn't pronounce Quinn very well. It would come out Shin. He'd say his name was Joey Shin. And so, jokingly, I started calling him Joey Shin. And so, of course, I say you always get called what you call people. So, before I knew it, they were calling me Daddy Shin. And then that turned into Shino, and then Bino, and then Benoster. This is over numerous years now, a decade or so. And it went to Benoster, Bino, Shino, Bino, Benoster, Noster, Nazi, or just Noz and then Nazi, or either one of those was acceptable or frequently used. So people sometimes ask. So there's that mystery answered, if anybody cared. But today would have been Andy's 33rd birthday. This is November 30th, 2000 or 2020, I guess I'll say. And today should have been his 33rd birthday. Of course, he's been gone now for a year and a half, which is still kind of hard to believe. But I guess with it being his birthday, I wanted to talk a little bit about him. And I don't know how far I'll get because I have lots of things to say. So I'll probably need subsequent sit-downs to get it all in. But before I forget some of these things, I wanted to get them recorded. So Andy Quinn, born November 30th, 1987. He was always a charmer, always loved to be around people. His eyes would light up, even as a little kid, when he saw people around, especially if the attention was on him, which we often joked with him that he loved to be the center of attention, and we would jokingly say, he would say, "Look at me, I'm Andy Quinn, look at me, I'm Andy Quinn." But he was a people person for sure. I don't know where he got that. But when Andy was born, Kathy started getting the labor pains during a Cleveland Browns football game. And so I was not very sympathetic immediately to her symptoms. So when we got to the hospital, they claimed it was too late to give her medicine, which I'm sure she's never forgiven me for. But we weren't there that late at night. I think maybe 8 o'clock, 7 or 8 at night at the latest. Probably not that late because I don't think the Browns game was over. But anyway, they refused her medication because they said she was too close to delivering. So she was in a lot of pain. But he wasn't born until 4:20 a.m. on November 30th. We had expected him closer to Thanksgiving, which had been the prior week. But so he was a little bit later than we projected. But anyway, he was healthy and happy, and never did really ever cry till he got old enough to figure out sometimes he could get something by crying. But he was never really one to cry. He was always a pretty happy baby, as was Joey. But just some funny things I can think of looking back when Andy was a child. It's funny because he was always a big boy. Both of my sons were, and they were often called big man, big guy, big fella, that kind of thing. We always kind of laughed about that. They were big boys, and people would always call them big man or big something or other. And we always kind of chuckled about that. But when I used to take the boys with me pretty much everywhere I went. If I was going to the grocery store or anywhere else, I would take them, and they would get a little child's grocery cart so the child could kind of pretend to shop. And the boys would take small carts around and fill them up with all the treats they wanted. And I would let them fill them up just to keep them busy. But when we get to the checkout, I'd just push their carts aside and just buy what I had in my cart. And they would negotiate for a treat at checkout. So I'd usually get them a sucker or gum or something, if they were good. But they were were always a hoot in the store. Um, Sometimes maybe not to my liking. I got to know security everywhere we went because they were pretty rambunctious. But at one point, the grocery store would have coupons in the aisles, and a little, I don't know, electronic thing would spit out the coupons. If you took one, it would spit another one out. And the boys would go up and down the aisles and pick up untold numbers of those that we weren't going to use. They just thought it was cool. So they would go around and snatch all those up. And I'm guessing Andy was the brains behind a lot of this, and Joey just was going along, but I don't know. But I remember we went into, we were shopping at Big Bear at that time at Sawmill Road and Bethel Road in the Dublin area. And they had this big walk-in cooler for the beer. And you could access the beer from outside the cooler, but we liked to go in the cooler. It was kind of neat, and you could see some beers that maybe weren't otherwise on display. And the boys liked to go in there. It was like a little club or something. And so we were in there. I was looking at beers, and somebody else, some other adult, came in the cooler, and Andy says to them, "My dad is going to buy all this beer and take it home and drink it all and get drunk," which of course was embarrassing. I'm sure the person he was talking to was, "Oh, you can be really proud of your dad, I'm sure." So he would tend to get me in trouble little ways like that. Not really in trouble, but kind of make me look bad. He did some things at school, like for Father's Day, and he had a thing talking about my dad, and he had on there, "My dad's favorite thing to drink is whiskey," and I don't know, I'll have to find that and get it out and read some of the other stuff, but he would rat on me, sort of. It was kind of funny. But let's see, many other stories, I'm sure, at grocery stores, and I'll probably jump all around because I have a few notes, but other things come to mind as well. But as I said, I'd take the boys pretty much everywhere with me. So Kathy needed a break from when I get home from work. We went to lots of baseball games, the Columbus Clippers, and at that time Columbus had a pro basketball team, the Columbus Horizon. They had a minor league hockey team, the Columbus Chill, and I would take them to all those games, and inevitably they would run wild through the stadium, the arena, wherever we were, and inevitably security would come and find me. "Sir, are these your boys?" "I don't know. Why? What did they do?" Like, "Well, they can't just be running loose through here. You need to keep an eye on them." Like, "Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you. Sorry." That happened about everywhere we went, it seemed. And also everywhere we went, inevitably, both boys would have to go to the bathroom. So we were intimately familiar with every bathroom in the city. And just about every place that was free to go. I knew every park within a half-hour radius. So we did a lot of time going around different parks and letting the boys climb on whatever apparatus they had. There was one park in particular in Upper Arlington. I can't remember the real name of it, but the boys named it the Great Park because they had like these kind of wooden castles, sort of, that they could climb on and go through that they liked a lot. So we went there quite a bit. But let's see. Kathy and the boys used to meet me a lot at lunchtime, as my job at that time was pretty close to where we lived. And there was a particular restaurant in Kingsdale Shopping Center in Upper Arlington where we often went, and Kathy would bring the boys, and they were pretty young. I don't know, not in school yet, so 5 and 3 maybe, the oldest. And we had ordered our food, and we had met my friends John Poole and Colonel Elliott for lunch. And so we were all sitting there, and it was taking kind of a long time to get our food. And the waiter comes by, and Andy's holding his fork and his knife and pounds on the table and goes, "Where's our frickin' food?" Which was kind of inappropriate, but was funny as hell, and it was just what we were thinking. But we laughed about that forever. But Andy was serious about his food, and I have a lot more to say about that later. But he was also a charmer. He just loved people, especially women. We lived next door to some young single ladies. We lived in Hilliard for a while, and the boys were still pretty young in elementary school, And these three ladies were out in their swimsuits, bikinis, presumably, sun tanning. And there was one in particular that Andy seemed to like a lot, and they were real nice to both of the boys. But Andy was just old enough to, he could talk more and was more of a schmoozer. And Andy goes up to this attractive blonde woman who's laying out in her bikini and says, "I like your belly." And it was adorable. He wasn't sure what it was, but he liked it. And I talked to him about that when he was much older. And he said, "Yeah, I didn't know what word to put on it, but I knew that I was attracted." And we had a good laugh about that. And I took him with me to a Public Relations Society meeting. I was president of the chapter in Columbus, Ohio. And I think that's what it was. But anyway, Bill Hoskett was there, who was a basketball star at Ohio State some years ago, I think in the 60s. And Andy came dressed looking much like me. He had a jacket and a tie and nice slacks and business cards that I think we had made up, or Mike Taylor, I think his uncle, printed some for him. And they had his name and things like "Have Tongue Will Talk" or other funny things on there. And so I took Andy to this meeting, and he was always a young adult acting. And so when he met Bill Hoskett, he introduced himself, shook his hand, and "I'm Andy Quinn," and gave him a business card. And Bill Hoskett was real impressed. He's like, "Wow, impressive young man." And Andy couldn't have been more than 5. And but people were always impressed. He was outgoing and friendly. He would introduce himself. I took him to a Upper Arlington High School basketball game because the video company I was working for was producing their highlight video. And we walked in. Andy goes right up to the cheerleaders and says, "Hi, I'm Andy, and my number is 777-0978. And these girls like, "Are we supposed to call you?" And he said, "Sure. But my mom calls, just hang up, and she don't want to talk to you. Just call back later." And it was adorable. And some of the boys scooped him up and sent him crowd surfing. They were passing him up through the stands and back down. And, oh, he loved it. I was a little bit nervous, but he ate that up. Another thing that really stands out is Andy's youth was he wanted to have a band. And the band was supposed to be Andy, me, and Joey. The problem was I played drums and some guitar. Andy and Joey had no kind of musical training whatsoever, so I wasn't sure what our band was supposed to consist of. I don't think we even ever had a name for it that I can recall. But Andy was real serious about this, and he would spend hours thinking about how to introduce the band and get some notoriety and gain some fans and such. So his idea was to have a concert in the basement of our home in Hilliard. And so at his urging, I put up a makeshift curtain so that we could appear from behind a curtain at this show. And Andy had given thought to security. He was telling me we better arrange for some security because I'm expecting a lot of people at this show. And he said, "You might want to call your insurance man and make sure you have adequate insurance for this big show." And again, I think he's in the first grade, maybe second grade, 6, 7 years old. And he's thinking about all this parking. He wanted me to talk to all the neighbors about the traffic and parking because he was concerned about that. And he would tell me, it's like the whole time on the school bus, riding to and from school, I'm just thinking about our show and how we're going to do it. And he wanted to get lights and different effects, and he really thought it all through. I was impressed at his level of detail and I guess maturity and knowing the different kind of things that would be needed for an event like that kind of blew my mind. It showed me he was a very highly intelligent young man. He sometimes hid that. But that show never really happened. Sometime later when we moved to Dublin, he was still on that kick and had the whole basement kind of set up for it. And one night we had a bunch of the family there. I think it was a New Year's Eve maybe, or Christmas or something. And he got to do some modified version of his show, but it was mostly lights and mostly visual at that point, because we never did get a band together that really did anything. We did perform at a church talent show. We were going to St. Brendan Catholic Church in Hilliard. We lived in that area. And Andy and Joey and I participated in a talent show. We sang the Herman's Hermits, I'm Henry VIII. And that was kind of fun. And got good reception. We had planned to do a song again the next year, but the boys kept fighting over what song and who was the lead and what parts were they singing, and it was nothing but fighting, so we ended up not participating in that one. But of course, Andy was famous for getting up at my brother Chuck and his wife Ann's wedding in Detroit when Andy was 3 years old, I think, maybe coming up on 4. And we sang the cover of the Rolling Stone, which brought the house down. He was in front of, I don't know, a couple hundred people. Andy had his own microphone and belted out the song, and he loved it, and the crowd loved it. And Chuck said for many years after, people would come up to him and say, hey, remember that kid that sang at your wedding? What's he doing? And that was kind of neat. So he was always famous for that moment. And actually, going back even further than that, there's a video in existence I had sent into America's Funniest Home Videos when Andy was, I think, only maybe 1.5 years old. He couldn't really speak yet. But we had this play guitar, pretend plastic guitar, and he just picked it up and started playing it and singing in some unintelligible language, but belting out this song, and like he meant it, like it was coming from his soul. And he played for quite a while, and Kathy and I were dying laughing. And I thought, I want to get my camera and record some of it, but I'm worried I'll miss it, or he'll be done when I walk away to get my camera. But I got my camera and came back, and he was still at it, and I got a couple minutes of it, and it's on this Andy channel, I'm sure, somewhere, if you look. If you haven't seen it, as is that cover of the Rolling Stone song, is definitely here on YouTube. But he was belting out this song and words that you couldn't understand, but he meant it. It was from the heart, and that showed his love for music at a very young age. And of course, he's a Quinn, so music is inbred in us, I think. So that's just a little bit about him. I've gone on now here for about 20 minutes, apparently. Time goes fast. So I got a lot more to share, and we'll do so at some time, future sit-downs like this. But here on his birthday in 2020, I'm thinking of him. And we miss you, buddy.